All right, Mr. Chair, you are now live.
All right, I see that. I get a little note about that. That's good. All right, welcome everybody, both those that are here virtually as well as those that might be watching to the June meeting of the Maritime Advisory Board of the City of Annapolis. We have with us today members Frida Wildy. I'm Terry Lomax, the chair, Peter Trogdon, member, Beth Bellis, the harbor master, Andy Fagley, member, Jake Iverson, who is a guest, Rick Frankie, who is a member, Hope Stewart from the city of Annapolis, Bill Woodward, who's a member, Mike Tomasini, who's a member, Duncan Hood, who's a member, Tammy Hook, our reporter, and then our faithful monitor, Julian Jacques from the city. So Tammy, we seem to have a quorum. And so with that, we will take up the first order of business, which is the approval of the minutes from the May meeting. Tammy sent everybody a copy of those minutes sometime back a few days ago. Are there any suggested changes to the minutes?
Nope.
Hearing none, is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
All right, Mr. Tomasini moved, Mr. Hood seconded, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Speak up now, Tammy. So minutes are approved. Rick, any update on the from the county MIAB?
Well, not really. At the previous month's meeting in April, it turned out that the May meeting was tentatively scheduled for Memorial Day, and nobody wanted to meet on Memorial Day. And since there was no pressing business, they voted not to meet. So no report.
Would they typically have a July meeting?
Normally, no. And I don't know what the plan is.
All right. Well, and the reason I bring that up is because once again, much to my disappointment and chagrin, you will not be joining us. So I would need to find a replacement for somebody to go
Very
visit
true.
with the MIAB, unless you would like to just stay on and come to report to us.
Well, it's not exactly an overwhelming job.
And
you can tell from my reports.
That might be self-defeating of the idea that you're taking the board.
Well, I think that's up to the chairman.
Yeah. All right. So everybody give some thought to who might want to participate. Are they doing that virtual or are they live meetings? They still virtual, Rick?
I'm sorry?
Are they still virtual or are they live meetings?
They were virtual. The reason I'm not sure about the July meeting is that they usually take 2 meetings off in the summer. And whether or not, since they decided to take May off, there may be a July meeting, but there usually is not one in August.
Right. Okay. Could you tell or ask the chair to put, I can't remember if I'm still on the mailing list, but to put me at least on the mailing list. That'll jog my memory that we need to see for somebody to participate.
Yeah, well, you are still on the mailing list.
Am I? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get it. All right. Economic development update. Hope, are you filling in for Stephen or?
Yes, I am. So I don't know if you all have heard, the governor will be lifting the state of emergency as of July 1st. So I know a lot of the questions that come up at this meeting are about the recovery zones. So recovery zones are in place 30 days until the end of the state of emergency. So they'll have until the end of July. After that, anybody who would like a parklet or to continue their recovery zone can apply for a seasonal parklet application. That's if they want to rent city space like the parking spaces. The parklet or the recovery zones in private property, such as the parking lots, are a little bit more complicated. So that might require some legislation on behalf of the city if that is to continue, but we don't have anything definitive on that. So right now we have the applications in place, or people can apply, but they would have to rent the spaces. So that could be from $25 a day to $35 a day.
So and I assume you're referring to the parking spaces downtown that are typically metered?
Correct.
what about, for example, or in particular, Davis's, which is on the street, ostensibly taking up parking, but they're not metered parking. It's just residential parking.
Yeah, I think one of the issues with Davis's is actually that they closed the street.
Right.
So if we are to continue that in any form, we'll have to take a special look at that. There's nothing that's been decided about a situation like Davis's. Like I said, some of the more complicated ones are the parking spaces, because that's all part of the parking requirement, which is a zoning requirement. So once a state of emergency is lifted, we have to go back to our normal laws and procedures. So we're going to have to take a look at some of these particular situations.
Right. I think people generally have been reasonably happy with the variety of outdoor dining options, and at least speaking for someone who resides in Eastport, it does not seem to have had a major impact on on traffic or parking, which is kind of interesting because we hear so much about the potential for issues of traffic and parking, but then they didn't really come to fruition. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Anybody else have any questions for Hope on the recovery zones and any other economic development? All right.
Volunteer.
Mike.
Mike.
So I got it from somebody else, and I haven't checked to see if I got anything from the city yet about that August 1st. Is the city actively reaching out to everybody that's holding a special event permit to let them know that what's going on?
We will, yes.
All right, very good.
Yeah, all this just happened today, so.
Duncan, any update on the comprehensive plan?
Well, of course not, Terry. Bill Crickets, you saw the email I sent to Eric. There's just nothing going on. They're in research mode right now.
Okay. When we get to actually the next item is the Maritime Task Force update. So there was a 2-hour, and Mike actually was one of the presenters, did an excellent job, as did I think the whole panel, before the city council at a work session this afternoon. I'll give my take on it and then Mike, I'll let you give your take. I watched it on the city's television, the public television website on Comcast, and I watched the whole thing. I thought it went very well. There were questions from various council members that when you were sitting at 50,000 feet like I was, were not what I would call deal-breaking kind of questions. Mike might have gotten a different impression. As usually you get a different impression when you're sitting in the room getting the questions fired at you. But there were certainly some questions about whether or not the public access. There was back and forth about the restaurants in Eastport. But other than one council member who seemed intent on wanting to introduce the subject of residential units in maritime zones, which no one else seemed taken by that. Frankly, I thought it went quite well. The time frame is, I think the first step would be, now that they've sort of nailed down the broad parameters, is to introduce legislation, and along with it a staff report. Then it would go to the Planning Commission, where there have already been work sessions over the last few months, and then basically come back for the regular council procedures. I'm assuming that the legislation will come to the MAB, since it will be legislation, and that is where the rubber will meet the road. The main takeaway that I have gotten is that while everybody wanted everything, there is that the consensus is the consensus that came among the task force was that we're going to take this, take what we have a consensus on, and go with that, and that not everybody's going to get everything on their wish list. But the two encouraging things that came out of this is, number one, that the legislation apparently is going to include a provision that the council actually review this again in 2 to 3 years and try to get it on a regular schedule for review instead of every 34 years. I mean, the cicadas only take 17 years. So I think that is a positive. The other positive I see out of this is that there's going to be a more organized way to try to monitor that businesses are complying with the changes, because one of the complaints that have been bandied about from time to time is that the city has not been very good at enforcing the limitations in the maritime zones, and that this go around, if we're going to make some tweaks to the zone, then with that should come a better ability to monitor it, and probably be in the form of a report. There's an annual report required by each business that's utilizing, taking advantage of either relaxed non-maritime uses, restaurant use, et cetera, reporting that they are in compliance both with their percentages as well as with any triggers that are necessary. So that was sort of my overall take. Mike, you can fill us in on what you saw from sitting in the council chambers.
Yeah, I don't think it was much different than what you saw, Terry. It wasn't particularly combative. A lot of the questions were really good questions. I think obviously anybody who knows Eileen knows that she did her homework. She got a lot of really smart and really, people who are really going to be affected when this thing comes down one way or the other, and put them in a room and tried to figure out what was going to work for, if not everybody, for most. And I think that that's the product that we're delivering right now. I thought the really compelling piece of it today was Cardi Templeton's perspective, which was, from a property owner, and she basically laid it out. This is my box of people that I can put into some of these spaces, and they're going to look to the outside world just like every other office user, but I can't put the other office users in there and have them pay higher rents to help me maintain my property in a way that can keep my maritime businesses functioning properly. So I thought she did a really good job of highlighting the struggles from a property owner's perspective. I thought that the council raised some really good questions. And I think if you looked at the faces in the room, I think that the product right now, the way it exists, if the legislation is drawn up kind of the way that we've mapped it out so far, I think it's got the votes. So I think we might be getting somewhere. And a lot of the feedback led us to the piece that Terry was talking about, which is how do you make sure that it's working 3 to 5 years from now? And there are some tracking mechanisms that the group has come up with to say, who got hurt in years 1 and years 2, and who could use a little bit more help in the next go round, and what kind of tweaks do we need to make? And if it's, if the pain is felt here, then we might be able to address it with small changes to the legislation down the road, as opposed to waiting another 30 plus years to get something fixed. So, yeah, all in all, I thought it went really well.
Any questions on that? Boys, a quiet group tonight. Must be summer.
Sure.
I have a question.
Sure.
So are they talking about changing the uses, the approved uses for those different zones? Is that what we're talking about?
There's a little bit of that. More of it is about the percentages. So in WMI, right now, right, they can only have 0% non-maritime tenants. There was a general consensus amongst the group, especially people who are in WMI, WME, and WMM, that there's got to be more flexibility. It's not in the current market, it doesn't work, right? So everybody should get something in terms of flexibility, and the properties with the triggers are who are going to probably get the most flexibility, but there should be something available to everybody. So that's where it's landing. You've got to buy a travel lift and figure out how to launch boats in the water for you, Peter. But there are a couple of pieces of it that I think that could help your property down the road, and the ones adjacent to you that don't right now have a trigger through what we developed as incentives, which are basically almost a mitigation. If you can provide some kind of improvement to the community that's worthwhile and significant, then you could also get a flexibility in how much of your space has to be maritime. So those are the chunks of the apple. The properties with the triggers, like Cardi Templeton space and the boat yards on Back Creek in the WMI are what we're looking at right now is 15% additional non-maritime on top of their current regs. The properties without triggers are going to have to use that incentive program, but in the end, we're thinking that it's going to lead to I don't know what's the best way to say it. It's going to lead to a critical mass of the ones who are going to have flexibility, who rent to non-maritime tenants, are going to drive maritime tenants to the places where they don't have flexibility. So that's the hope.
So
Okay.
there was a lot of discussion about restaurants, and much of the focus on the benefit side of it was because for restaurants on the WME side, the WMI side, where they have the land area, the parking, the ability to have parking, and how that in turn ties into water access to the public. And Rod Jabin made a very interesting point that and this was an answer to one of the council members' questions about, well, how does going to dinner in a waterfront restaurant in your marina help with public access? And Rod was very eloquent about, when you come down to a restaurant, you're sitting having a beverage, or you're having dinner, and you're looking out at the water, and you're not a boater, all of a sudden you start seeing activity on the water, you start getting an appreciation of the water. Maybe the next time down, you're going to want to go figure out who's got a paddle, where I can rent a paddle board, or where I can rent a canoe, or maybe where I can go rent a power boat or a sailboat. And so it doesn't, that even though that when you go to a restaurant and you're sitting looking out at the water, you're not, quote, accessing the water. It is introducing people who might otherwise have come down to the water to come down and experience, the waterfront from at least, from a viewpoint, from a view, and then that hopefully leads to other things. They see boats and boat yards. They see activity going on that entices them to then become more active and access. The other thing that was pointed out that we all know is that there are a large number of already street end access points that are probably underutilized and probably not even always known to the general public, that the part of the program is to try to enhance, keep moving, as Beth has been describing over the past few months, have the city keep moving forward with improving those access points for additional public access. So all in all, I thought it went pretty well. The devil's always in the details, and the problem we have this year is that it's an election year, and so there's a cutoff on passing of introduction of legislation. So the push is now to get legislation introduced before that cutoff. So anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, just a quick one.
Sure.
So Javen is in the same district as Port Annapolis. Did I catch the fact that you guys were thinking of going 15% more non-maritime or 15% maritime?
Well, in WMI, it's the same thing. you're currently 0, it could go to 15. So therefore, it's going up 15 in WMM. That could mean going from 30 to 45. But in WMI, it would go from 0 to 15. WME could go from 0 to 15, as long as you can meet some of the other parameters.
Okay, great, thanks.
So, and then on top of that, what Mike was referring to about incentives, there's an opportunity to obtain an additional 5% depending upon what else that you might want to, what else you may do. That's across the board. That's independent of any triggers. So there's an additional small percent for ROD, for example. And by the way, that percentage, whether it's 45 or 15, is only applied to the existing physical building. It is not applied to the land area, and it is not applied to any new building. So, for example, Annapolis City Marina, which is basically a big office building that happens to sit on the water and has a marina out front, has a fair amount of square footage, and the impact on Annapolis City Marina would be more significant than it would be, or say on Cardi Templeton 222 Severn, would be more significant than the impact would be on Port Annapolis or Javen or somebody on, because you don't have that square footage of building that could be used.
Yeah, I got that.
I have a question. Is that presentation that went on today, is that recorded and available online to go?
It should be. I don't know if it's online immediately. It was broadcast and recorded, so it should be.
You guys
Just give it a
want
day or two.
send you the link real quick.
I'm sorry,
Julian.
Julian.
I know exactly where the link is. I can just forward it to the whole group for you guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome.
Great. All right, and by the way, Tammy, if you didn't notice, Ms. Goslin has joined us also.
Yep, I noticed. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Any, I don't have any. Debbie, do you have any update on the NDZ application? It's just still meandering its own path?
Yes, it is. Donna told me that they had some questions about the application, they being EPA, that they have asked Donna. So it's still in process and moving forward, and she anticipates that will be completed sometime this year, probably late summer.
So I have another update, actually.
Okay.
So it's in the Federal Register, so it's entirely passed through the federal process. And so the only reason we're not enforcing it right now is because the state of Maryland hasn't, I guess they have to marry up their regulations and their enforcement tools with that. So it was actually announced in the Federal Register on May 11th. And it was sent to me by email about 5 days ago. So that was a little confusing to me because it looked like it was entirely passed and complete. But Jackie Gild has informed me that the state of Maryland has some other steps. Just to be clear, everything Debbie said was correct, but just to clarify.
All right. Berta's house. The last, as I understand it, and I didn't talk to Ashley, but to someone else, I believe it is still, they're still trying to hammer out the fine points of the DNR's access or use of that portion of the dock that they use, and so it is still meandering in the state process. It has not been, the deed has not been completed and recorded yet, but it may be a race between the NDZ and Berta's house as to which gets completed first, but they're both in that final stage, as I understand it. And Beth, you may have something more than I have, but that's what I have.
So I spoke to Ashley today about that. It seems like most of the details have been hammered out, but I feel like, I think DGS has to be a participant in settlement. They don't have a date. I think it's 50-50 whether or not we'll own it by July 4th. And I couldn't tell you what's going to be contained in an MOU between Annapolis Waterfront Sailing Center. I'm not sure what the goal is there or what's going on there.
With respect to the 4th of July, is the city's plan, and I use that term in very somewhat loosely, is the plan still to have 4 or 5 small ships, tall ships come visit that weekend?
So there's going to be, at present, there's expected 2 tall ships and 1 skipjack. So 2 tall ships and 1 skipjack are expected on the 2nd of July, and they are expected to stay till the 5th or 6th of July.
Is this by skipjack? Are you talking about the Wilma Lee, or are you talking about another skipjack?
The Wilma Lee and the Providence and the Pride 2.
Okay. And they will be, are they, what is their role at, what are they they just going to be static displays? Or are they going to be doing educational things? Are they going to try to charter? Do we know?
So we do know, so they're coming in on the 2nd and in a procession with a fireboat leading, and everyone will dock up on the 2nd. There's expected to be some sort of VIP dinner, and then they're planning paid public tours, paid public sales, and also like a captain's panel interview, and also a brunch. And I suppose I think I've encapsulated all of it. I'm not sure I have.
But are any of them coming to the city? Or are they all going into the Burtis dock?
They're all going to be on the long dock or the city's dock that is currently hosting Natural Resources Police. There won't be any boats on the city's current dock, but it's likely that we could own that dock by then.
So when you say you're talking about the dock for where DNR ties up along the Naval Academy bulkhead?
Correct. One boat might occupy that.
Beth, are you saying that there won't be anybody at the charter dock?
There will be. The Providence is still scheduled to be at the charter dock.
And when you say paid charters or paid cruises, they are doing cruises that are open to the public, that are the people are paying them to go out on?
Yes, that is what they're planning. They're planning to solicit these on social media, and the public will be able to do 1 boat or multiple boats for tours and sales.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, because they have asked me to not have my boat downtown to accommodate these other boats. I think that's an interesting perspective.
So yeah, that is, Debbie.
And is it regardless of whether the city takes ownership of the dock or not? The plans are going forward either way?
It appears that the plans are going forward either way.
Well, frankly, I don't expect that the deed will be that will be done in the next 15 days anyway. It doesn't sound like it to me, but it is of concern that the charter dock is going to be utilized for basically a commercial enterprise of paid cruises, because I wonder whether that is compliant with the grant restrictions.
So the charter dock isn't under grant restrictions. The charter dock is governed by the charter dock policy and the city code. So the city code dictates that everyone will pay full fees unless the city council waives those fees, or unless the mayor waives up to $300 in fees.
And what's the length of the Providence?
Off the top of my head, I think it's around 257 feet.
So the $300 would not cover the full fee for the Providence.
No, it would not.
And is that $300 total, or is that $300 per day?
It's $300 total, and if you give me a moment, I'll tell you the total fee for that boat.
Per the charter policy, it's the fee times the number of feet times every pickup and departure.
So assuming, so the total fee for the Providence is $3,925 for her entire stay. And then the other two boats, I hesitate to give a price for those because if they're on a dock that doesn't belong to the city, then it's immaterial. But the entire cost, if it were all belonging to the city, is over $9,500.
So to Debbie's point, though, if they are taking out, let's say they go out, 5 2-hour cruises or 4 2-hour cruises, are they being charged, the pickup and drop off fee too?
I mean, I haven't been asked to charge any of them any money. So I couldn't tell you what the city's plan is for that. And I don't know the Providence's plan for how many pickups and drop-offs. So the assessment I gave the city manager was for an arrival and a departure and the entire stay, assuming she's only taking one charter, because I don't know differently.
Okay. Mike, did you have a question? Oh, okay. Any other questions about that? Street and parks, I touched on it briefly. Any more update on that, Beth?
I mean, I don't have any real updates, but just to remind the group, Cheston's moving forward nicely. 6th Street is moving forward slowly. Lafayette is finished. We are waiting for a grant to be waiting for confirmation that we got $250,000 that will cover street ends like 3rd Street, Conduit, trying to remember, Amos Garrett. So we have a few others that we're going to work on. The $250,000 that's coming next is not going to cover more than 1 or 2. So our plan is just keep hammering away, just keep applying for the same maximum amount each year and keep our list running. So to recap, 6th Street's moving forward, Cheston's moving forward, Lafayette's done, and Tucker Street is beginning, not grant funded. Lots of community involvement, lots of community unhappiness. And so I don't know exactly where we are with Tucker Street, other than most people are very unhappy.
What if it's an improvement to Tucker Street, other than concern about too many people using it? Is there a particular concern about why it should not be rehabbed?
I think because they're concerned about people using it. Many residents are saying, let's just don't even improve it whatsoever. And also, I think that everyone was very surprised that the city council took their proposed edits to Title 11 and changed it from an ordinance that could be enforced in Title 15 and said, you know what? Everyone in the whole county can come. So they're just mad. They're just mad. And I had to go and take down all the signs that said city residents only, and permits are selling like hotcakes. And now everyone's like, don't even improve it. We're just irritated. Although I would say enforcement there doesn't really seem to be a big deal right now.
So Beth, when you say permits are selling like hotcakes, are you talking about moorings?
No permits for launching from Tucker Street.
Oh, I understand. Okay, thank you.
What is the, is there a pattern to what is, I mean, that's not a big launch ramp. Is there a pattern of what is the permits? Who's applying for the permits? Are they paddlecraft? Are they, small whalers, canoes?
I'm not sure. They don't really tell us that. I really don't think it's going to be a big deal. I only think this became a bigger deal because it got in the paper. So like a dozen or 20 people are like, hey, I'd like to launch my whaler there. But I don't think this is going to be a big deal. I do think that a new ramp with a floating dock is going to be an improvement. I do think enforcement issues are separate and different than enforcement issues. Like, so if we're gonna like put a new ramp, that's different and separate than enforcement issues. So I did get together with Kevin Warrants from SP Plus, and we're getting ready to put 6 new signs up. And we've hammered out the difference between like a parking complaint and a launching complaint. And I think we have a game plan. And I just think this stuff is going to have to settle out over the next year. I'm not sure how it's going to all end up. But I think we're sort of in a holding pattern because we have what we have because council approved it. So we're going to put our signs up and we're going to do the best that we can for the public and just see what happens next.
Beth, is there actually any enforcement at all? I mean, except for when you guys go up there in your patrol boat?
I mean, there's been three complaints since January 1st. One was a commercial launcher. We wrote them a warning. They haven't been back. One was probably a dealer, but there were no identifying marks on the vehicle, so we couldn't take any action. And one was during Blue Angels, and I told them, I'm sorry, but if it doesn't involve life or property, I can't respond. So, I mean, actually, there's been 4 complaints, but that's since January. So that's not that bad. So
Yeah.
either they're not complaining or it's not that bad.
Right.
Or it's not that much of a nuisance. It's just launch a boat and drive up the street and park it by the elementary school, right?
It's really not summer yet. Kids are still in school. So it might get bad, but it's not really bad yet. So we'll see. We'll see what July brings.
Well, 4th of July we should bring it. If there's going to be an issue, it probably will be the 4th of July weekend.
And we'll have so much time to enforce it then with the tall ships and the explosive barge. Yeah.
Right.
So does this mean that each time somebody wants to launch, they get a permit, or do they get a permit for multiple launches?
They get a permit for a calendar year. And if it's in their driver's side window, they're good to go.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on that topic? Again, we don't have Ashley, but Beth, maybe you might know, what's happening with Wells Cove?
Does that mean voucher?
Yes.
Does that mean the Blue Heron condominiums?
Yes.
All I can tell you is that the writ of mandamus is still active in the courts.
Okay, so it hasn't been heard yet?
I mean, there's been multiple filings. There hasn't been a verdict. And nothing's happened since March. So there's no change as far as I can tell based on the circuit court webpage.
Okay. And it's not on the list, but it did come up during the discussion about on the task force discussion earlier. Any update on Hawkins Cove?
Can you tell me what that means?
That's the one that the Hawkins Cove is the little cove that goes in. If you were to go past the Truxton boat ramp and go up, and it basically fronts at the HACA offices.
So I don't think I know the issues there, and so I certainly don't have an update.
So Debbie, you might be able to help me. The woman that came, she's assistant city manager, whatever. I can't remember her title. That came and gave us an update on Hawkins Cove and about 2 meetings ago.
Jackie Guild.
Yes, that was her. So she gave us a presentation on some ideas of what might happen with Hawkins Cove besides just cleaning it up, also making it more accessible. Maybe landscaping isn't the right word, but waterside vegetation, landscaping, maintenance, etc. But because that came up as I think Alderman Gabe was the one who asked the question about improving that area and having, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I got the impression the question that he asked, but I don't think was actually answered, was there be any plan for vendors to come down there for renting of kayaks or paddleboard or something? I sort of got the impression that was what he was asking.
I think that was the bigger part of his question was about, there are going to be improvements made there, and how do we make sure that ends up being a legitimate water access point, which I thought was a really good question, right? And it fits really well with a kayak rental, or even like static kayaks that people could go down and use, sign a waiver, like some kind of boat club where 10 or 15 boats sit there, and it enables the people from that part of the city to have an easy access point for that kind of launch. So the way I took his question, I think probably the same as you, is if the city is going to spend some serious money renovating that area, then part of it should be to afford water access, not just a dock with a couple of chairs on it so that people are looking at it. How do we go from there to actually creating boating at that facility? And I thought that was a really good question. So
almost a mini Ellen Moyer Park situation.
Exactly. It's a perfect fit for it. If anybody's ever been back there, the water is dead calm. It's shallow, so if you're inexperienced and you fall in, you just stand back up and get back in your craft. So
well, the standing back up might take you down to your ankles.
Your knees.
That's another learning experience, though.
Yeah. But maybe if enough people stand up, they'll mush it down. So
down a little bit. Yeah.
You have to dump a lot of sand in there.
Yeah.
My recollection of the discussion was that it was strictly a shore side improvement. Then that is a seriously shoaled in piece of water. You can't get even the smallest of outboard boats up there. It's a paddleboard, kayak only kind of a place. And I think it's almost on the edge of our realm as far as, yes, we'd like to encourage it to happen, but unless somebody was going to go in there and dredge, it wouldn't really be a boat access as I can
and also to note that the city has developed a small trail from there that goes directly to Truxton Park through Annapolis, through Spa Cove Apartment, or what used to be Spa Cove Apartments. So you can pretty much get to Truxton Park from that piece of property in like a 5-minute walk through the woods. It's actually quite nice.
Yeah.
All right. Switching to new business, we'll just take them in order. I haven't heard anything back from Hillary on renewals. I am optimistic that something might happen in at the last council session in June. Otherwise, all of our terms, I don't remember. We've always been kind of loose about whether or not they actually expire, or whether we remain. Our terms remain until reappointment or new appointment. But in any event, stay tuned. on that. I will make a note to follow up with Hillary and see where that is in the process. And let me make a note. And then last but not least, we got referred, and I added it on at the last minute, and it did get to Hillary to post. Ordinance O2321, which is a harbor line adjustment at 2227 Cardi Templeton's property. I sent everybody a copy of the proposed ordinance, a copy of the and attached to that were several exhibits. The aerial photograph was not particularly helpful because it was a little bit blurry, but the two drawings, the color drawing and the black and white drawing as to where that harbor line was going to go, pretty well spelled it out. And one of the aldermen raised the question with me as to, and the only question that that was raised to me earlier was what, if any, impact it might have on Wednesday night racing if any boats were to come into that area. The thing that caught my eye is, if you are looking at it, is that there is a middle pier, relatively long pier, that goes out from sort of the middle of 2227, and Mike, you're probably familiar with it, that with the configuration of the proposed configuration, it looks as though as that pier could be extended. The farthest pier to the, I guess that would be to the southwest, might accommodate a small extension, but probably not as significant of an extension as might occur on the middle pier. And I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts about the potential for that. I have not talked to Cardi Templeton about whether or not there is an intention to extend that pier, but that would seem to be the only significant potential other than just making the harbor lines more compatible with what's there now. Then with that, is there, we might as well just deal with is there a motion to recommend approval of that, of O2321?
I move that we adopt or recommend the approval of this O2321.
Mr. Trogdon has seconded it. Tammy, any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposite? Anyone opposed? Tammy, there was no opposition, so if you'll just make a note that O2321 was recommended for approval, and I'll write up the legislative report on it.
Terry, is that the existing lateral line that's in the sort of turquoise hatched? We're not addressing that in this, right? Just the harbor line.
Just the harbor line. No, not okay. The lateral line. The lateral line is there, I think, just to delineate where the extent of the property.
Okay.
Because it really is it's really just the extension of the property line.
Okay, thanks.
In the last drawing, it's the blue line that kind of goes straight across the face of the chart house, and then kind of makes an arc from the corner of the chart house down to the southwestern lateral line. And it's existing Pier 4 and existing Pier 3. It's Pier 3 that possibly could take an extension if she wanted to do so.
Yeah. Right. Thanks.
All right. Well, that was a brief meeting. Let me just raise one other administrative or administrative detail. Typically, we take off the month. We do not have a meeting the month of August. was talking with Eileen Fogarty about the timing on the legislation, the Maritime Task Force legislation. And I earlier mentioned that it would first be introduced at council, that would then have to go to Planning Commission and this board. And the timing of that is a little uncertain, but she had some initial concern that it might be ripe for us to consider our input and recommendations not in July, but rather in August. And so I just kind of want to alert everybody. I mean, I think it's important that that's an important piece of legislation that we as a board, whoever it is, should weigh in on. And if it turns out that we could get the legislation before us and consider it in July, then we would probably we'd hold the July meeting as scheduled. If it looks like it would roll into August, which is entirely likely, then my recommendation would be that we cancel the July meeting and instead meet in August to be able to consider that legislation. And I'll just ask if anybody's got any particular issue other than Andy, who's would be trying to call in from Canada as opposed to Lake Champlain, about if we did have to change that schedule and not meet in July, but rather meet in August.
Yeah, I'll be up in Champlain at that time, but I think I can probably patch in if we do another virtual.
I would probably, given that that's what we're going to do, I guess I'd have to coordinate. Julian, do you know whether when the state of emergency is lifted, are we going to still be able to hold the option of holding this board and other commissions, boards and commissions meetings virtually?
I believe right now the thought is that the boards and commissions will stay virtual for 30 days after the state of emergency is lifted.
Okay. So I would, because I mean, certainly in the summer months when people are away, it makes it a lot easier to grab a quorum if people can call in, even if we don't see your smiling face. If you're just on a phone, it certainly is easier to be able to dial into a Google Meet like this in those months. And I think I would probably encourage that we try to do that at least through the summer.
Sounds like a plan to me. Yeah, Pete.
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, so July looks like I'll be traveling, but I should have connectivity. But in August, I'll be in Montana, and I just don't think I'm going to have connectivity for the meeting. Just FYI.
Okay. Yeah, and again, I wish I could say what we're going to do. You can't put an antenna on top of a fly rod and.
I don't know why not.
And I will leave everyone, before we get a motion to adjourn, I'll leave everyone with this. I was coming back from Hemingway's last Saturday, had gone over by boat for lunch, and about pretty much right in line with the main span of the Bay Bridge, I came across a pod of about 5 dolphins, just swimming along, enjoying themselves in the bay.
How about that?
Yeah.
Very cool.
They had, and apparently I mentioned it to somebody else, and they said they had been down towards Shady Side a couple of weeks ago and I'm assuming it's the same pod, they tend to stay together.
Yeah.
I had seen them down around on the bay, down around off of Shady Side. So if you're out on the water, Mike, you might, it makes a pirate cruise even better if you can run into some dolphins.
Now, if we could just train them to eat jellyfish, we'd be in business.
True. Crabs are in short supply. Oysters are plentiful. Cantlers is bringing in crabs from Louisiana and Texas.
No way.
Yeah. So, and they're very expensive. It was like $130 a bushel. I mean, for a dozen jumbos.
Jesus.
So, All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Ooh, wait a minute. I think Mr. Frankie made that as one of his last motions. Is there a second?
Certainly.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Rick, we're gonna miss you. But enjoy not meeting with us.